Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Justin Wolf from Wolf Customs, and today we have another gauntlet review. This particular gauntlet review is going to be on a knife that is made by William Collins. Now, a lot of you guys already know who William Collins is. William makes some really nice handmade knives, and so I have gotten the opportunity to take a look at this one here today. Now, before we get into this review, I'm going to tell you that it's going to be a little bit different than most knife reviews. Most knife reviews are going to show people batoning, feather sticking, all that fun stuff. Well, since this is a gauntlet review, there's plenty of people that are going to show batoning, feather sticking, all that good stuff. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit different, something that I'm more qualified at doing than most. And basically is what I am going to do is, you guys know that I myself am a craftsman. This is the type of stuff that I build for a living. So is what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this piece of work here, and we're going to see how it holds up. Is it a good design? Is it quality made? Did we take anything into consideration as far as aftermarket items like sheaths, things like that? So that's exactly what we're going to do with this knife here. Now, when I first unboxed this, obviously the very first thing that I notice is the sheath. And of course, when it comes to sheaths, I really pay attention because, well, you guys know, that's what I do. That's what most people know me by, is my leather products. So the first thing I look at when I look at this is the sheath itself. The very first thing I noticed straight out the gate was William used a thicker, nicer leather. Most people that make custom knives, they spend so much time on the knife that they just don't spend that much time on the sheath. Now, looking at this sheath, William didn't spend a whole lot of time on it like, you know, what I do or something like that, but at least he used good quality material. This is a nice, thick, sturdy leather, and as far as construction-wise, it's been constructed, you know, decently well. Again, William is not a custom sheath maker by any stretch of the imagination here, but he still did a very good job making this sheath out of at least very high-end leather. There's obviously a lot of cosmetic things that could be addressed with the sheath, but again, custom knife maker, not custom leather maker. The other thing that I noticed about this particular sheath right away is how deep that knife sits in here. And it made me think to myself, why does it sit that far in there? What's the reason behind it? Other than just that added little bit of security. Is it going to be difficult to pull out? You know, all those things came to mind. So when I pull it out, I notice right away exactly why it fit so deep in there. But before we get into that, this is the Forest Fatty by William Collins. Now, again, remember, this knife has went through other people's hands. I am not the first one to touch it, so you will notice that there's some, you know, corrosion marks from it already being in different tree saps and everything else. So it's not a brand new shiny blade at all. And in fact, after I'm done with it, it's going to other people to put it through its paces and see if it's held up. But looking at it so far, there's no nicks or chips in this blade at all. It still feels very sharp. And so I would say that it's holding up fantastically so far. So a little bit about this particular knife. It is made out of 1095 high carbon steel. It's 1/8 inch thick, which in my opinion is perfect. 1/8 inch thick I really think it's the ideal thickness for any blade. If it's got a good temper, this will go through and baton very nice. You're not going to have to risk or worry about this thing breaking as long as they've got a good temper. When you start getting into the larger, thicker blades and everything, they just don't perform as well as 1/8 inch. He lists this as a blended saber grind, and it is, I could see this thing slicing vegetables and things like that like an absolute dream. I really hope that one of the other Gauntlet guys did it. The handle material is a unpolished micarta, and I love the fact that he went unpolished. And the reason for that is people will spend so much time really polishing these scales up and really making them beautiful that when they get wet or they get blood on them, they become very slippery. Well, if you leave your micarta unpolished like this, when it gets wet or gets blood on it, it actually swells just a little bit and still will maintain that grip. And speaking of grip, that actually is a pretty nice feel to it. He's got a pretty aggressive swell right here, which I really like. So it really feels the hand. For somebody that likes a larger handle, this is right up your alley. I really like that. Now back to what I had noticed about this being so deep in here. The reason it is that deep in there is because it has to go that deep. With the swell, see, there's nothing right here for it to grab and wet form. So in order to wet form and make this thing stick in here, it's got to go all the way up to this point right here. So that way there's some sort of friction when this is drawn out of the sheath. So if this thing doesn't go and sit that far down into the sheath, then it's going to fall out of the sheath very easy. So since he wet formed it all the way up here, it's got a nice positive retention, and this knife is not going to fall out of that sheath. It might be a little bit annoying to some people, the fact that it does sit in there so deep, but the fact that he's got that lanyard right there and that it's got the swells right here at the butt, you can actually draw it decently well. I don't have a personal problem with that at all. It's just a matter of personal preference. I don't personally like my sheaths to sit that deep, but you know what? The customer that might order this particular knife might like that. Now, one thing that I would suggest to add to this particular knife is this here. This is my all-time favorite woodcraft knife, and that is the Skookum bush tool. Now, you'll notice that not only does it flare right down here at the butt, but it also has those flares right here. So that allows you to put it in a sheath, and you can actually kind of hear it click into place. Hear that? That allows it to wet form right there. So that way it doesn't have to go in quite as deep, and you can still get that. You don't even have to put it in as deep as what I did here. I could put this handle sticking out all the way up to there, and I would still get that really good positive retention just because of those swells right there. So the first thing I see when I look at the Forest Fatty is basically how thin it is right here. If William was to put those flares right there, it would not affect the functionality of this knife at all. In fact, it would help with your hand wanting to slide up onto the blade a little bit. Plus, it would really make it nice for if you wanted to do some sort of aftermarket sheath or something along those lines. Now, I keep talking about aftermarket designs and everything, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to see this video and they're going to say, oh, well, it's a knife, you don't need this, you don't need that. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that we customize everything. We customize our phones, we customize our cars, we customize our clothing, we customize everything. So why would we not find a knife that we really love and then want to customize either it or put it in some sort of customized sheath. It's just the nature of us. That's what we like to do. We like to make it more personal. And when we put it, well, it's really starting to storm out there. But when we put it in, you know, an aftermarket sheath, it becomes a little bit more a part of us and a little less of the person that actually made it, if that makes any sense at all. So when I look at this knife, that's what I'm asking myself next is, what kind of sheath designs will work well for this knife? Well, this part right here, I can see that I can wrap a retention strap around there. So a sheath with a retention strap is going to work very nice. Again, if I wanted to use Kydex, the Kydex is going to fold around that and work decently well. It's very thin right here. So you're not going to get excellent retention when it comes to Kydex unless you use the thinner of the Kydexes. But you're still going to get a decent fit with your Kydex there. And as far as leather goes, obviously a deep fitting woodcraft sheath is going to work as long as it goes all the way up to there. If it doesn't go all the way up to there, it's not going to work very well for you at all. So the fact that you can use this knife in multiple sheaths, a woodcraft sheath, one that has a retention strap, and Kydex, that's good. That gives the customer options, and that's a good thing. Options are always a good thing. So now the last thing that I'm looking at when I look at this knife is, how is the quality? Because when you pay over $100 for a knife, it needs to be very high quality. Okay, the little blemishes and everything else that you expect out of somebody that's selling, you know, a custom $50, $60 knife or whatever, it's not really a big deal. But when you're spending $100, $200, whatever the cost may be on a custom knife, all those little blemishes and everything else, the maker really needs to take pride in their work. They need to try to do their very best to get rid of all those blemishes, all those little marks and everything else. You know, it's like when I make any of my products, my philosophy is all the little details add up to the final product. So if I don't pay attention to the little minor things or take my time to do the little things that nobody else does, at the end of the day, my sheath looks just like everybody else's. But because I pay attention to all the small details, at the end of the day, my sheaths do not look like everybody else's. It's plain and simple. And it's the same concept when it comes to any other thing that we do. You know, my buddy Travis Henry, he does construction. Look at his work in comparison to others. He takes pride in his work. It shows. And that's the same that should be said about everybody that does custom work like this. Now, the disadvantage I have with inspecting this knife and the craftsmanship of it is the fact that it's already went through multiple people, and if it's already been put through God only knows how many pieces of wood by now, as well as whatever else they've thrown at it. So I can't really knock the blemishes and everything else on the blade because, well, you know why. It's already dirty. You know, there's already a little bit of corrosion starting to wear on the spine because, well, it's a 1095 high carbon blade. There's ferrule rod marks and everything else on here. Sweat from a person's hand has gotten on the spine and everything. But looking at this knife, I mean, I can hold it and reflect the light on the blade, and I'm not seeing an uneven bevel. It's a very consistent bevel, which is very impressive because I'm pretty sure William does this all freehand. I don't think he uses a block or anything. So that's very impressive, William. Good job, man. Getting into this tight spot right here. you know, he did a pretty good job. You know, there's a few little minor blemishes in there. That's a tight spot. That's hard to get into. But other than that right there, I don't really see any other blemishes on this knife other than the blemishes that have been put there by people using the knife. So all in all, I would say the knife, well done. Well done. So what are my final thoughts on this knife? The shape of the knife is not for me. Okay, this is definitely not for me. God dang, that thing is just a few passes on that ceramic rod. She honed up like nobody's business. Crazy sharp. That thing would slice a tomato so thin it ain't even funny. But the shape, it's not for me. It's not. Okay, the handle shape, the blade shape, it's not for me. But that's only because I haven't used it outside. If I was to go use it for camp tasks and everything else, I might change my mind. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the other gauntlet reviews to see how it fared for them. This shape definitely is going to be for a lot of people, and like I said, it's going to be interesting to see those other videos to see how it fared. But this is not the only knife that William makes. William makes some really nice looking knives. In fact, he just got done making one that was very similar to my all-time favorite, the Skookum. And when I seen a photo of that knife, I kind of fell in love. And I have a feeling I'm going to be ordering one of those from William. That's all there is to it. So, all in all, William puts out some very nice products, guys. This is not the first one that I've ever handled of his. I have handled one of his other knives in the past, used it in the field, and it worked very nicely. So, does this knife here function? I don't know. I can only speculate. This video was simply on one craftsman looking at another craftsman's work and kind of comparing notes. That's basically what it boils down to. So I know that this review was not going to be something that everybody's interested in, but there are those out there that do care about things like we just talked about. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video on William Collins' Forest Fatty knife. I definitely look forward to the next gauntlet review. And as always, have a good one.